What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and with the NFL draft wrapping up today, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to go through and quickly update my top 24 Superflex rookie rankings. Now, I'm going to be going through my updated positional rankings tomorrow, and then I'll probably put out a top 36 overall rankings in a couple of days as I continue to kind of dive through this. But these are my initial updates. I reserve the right to move some things around, but just right after the draft, this is how I'm feeling about my top 25. Like I mentioned, this is going to be super flex, also tight end premium, so keep that in mind. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Like I said, there still may be some changes, so I'd like to hear what players you guys think should be higher or lower. But let's just dive right into it. We're going to be going in tiers, and we're going to start off with my 101 in tier 1. It's going to be Caleb Williams. This really has just turned into an amazing landing spot. I mean, pretty much every time you're the number one pick, you are getting drafted to the team that was the worst in the NFL the year before. That's not the case with Caleb Williams. The Bears were 7-10. You look at the group of weapons he has. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, they draft Rome Odunze, you have Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. This is really just the perfect situation here for Caleb Williams, and he's just a smash pick here at the 101 in rookie drafts. Then my other tier 1 player, it's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. He's my 102. Heading into the draft, I had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors back-to-back as my 102 and my 103. Landing spot would have determined the order those two went in. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the guy who gets the much better landing spot. I love him going to the Cardinals with Kyler as his quarterback 1. I think Marvin Harrison's a great pick here. With the second overall slot in rookie drafts. Now, pivoting into a little bit of a larger tier 2, we're going to start off with Jaden Daniels here as my 103. He goes second overall in the draft to the Commanders. He's got a decent group of weapons with Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. In this draft, the Commanders added Luke McCaffrey, also tight end Ben Sinnott, who we're going to talk about a little bit later in this video. And then Jaden Daniels just brings elite rushing upside to the position. So I think he's a very strong player here at the top of tier 2. And then right behind him, we're going over to the wide receiver position with Malik Neighbors, my 104. Obviously, the landing spot to the Giants is not great. It's a pretty bad landing spot, but I'm still very high on him as a player. Going to the Chargers would have been amazing, but it didn't happen. So I did drop him one spot. Like I mentioned, I had him as my 103. I moved Jaden Daniels ahead of him, but I still like him as the 104. Things can change up quickly. You know, there are pathways for this turning into a better situation within the next couple of years. So I'm still very, very in on Malik Neighbors here. Definitely not like tanking him down my rankings. And then after Malik Neighbors, going to be going with Drake May as my 105. The landing spot's not great here with the Patriots. Heading into the draft, both the weapons and the offensive line were looking pretty rough for the Patriots, but after they drafted Drake May, they selected 2 wide receivers and then a guard with 3 of their next 4 picks. So they're at least attempting to kind of address those concerns, make this a better situation for Drake May, which I can appreciate. Unclear if he's going to be the day 1 starter. I think there could be some advantage to him kind of sitting a little bit, especially give them some time to really put some better pieces around him. But I just really like his upside here. He has a lot of mobility. He can give you some rushing upside, not quite to the ceiling of a Jaden Daniels, but can still give you some really nice production on the ground, some really strong arm talent. And I also think it's just a good sign that you had both Kevin O'Connell and Brian Dable trying to trade up and draft Drake May, right? 2 very impressive offensive minds. They wanted to get Drake May as their quarterback. So I think that does inspire a decent amount of confidence in him just as an overall prospect. So even though the landing spot's not top tier, I'm still rolling with Drake May here as my 105. Then sticking around in tier 2, for my next 3 players here, it was pretty tough to rank these guys. I'm going to start off with Brock Bowers here as my 106. Now, the landing spot to the Raiders, it's not great. I felt like this wasn't really mocked a ton. I guess because, it didn't seem like they had that need with Michael Mayer there. But they go out, I guess they get their best player available here in Brock Bowers. And it's not great because you have a decent amount of solid weapons here with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Mayer, like I mentioned, but there's just no long-term quarterback situation, and they also didn't address it in this draft. So it's not even like you have a rookie who could potentially pan out. But in my opinion, Brock Bowers is just such an elite tight end prospect. His upside is so real, and these true high-ceiling tight ends, they're really tough to find, especially in tight end premium. They can just really give you a leg up over the rest of the the field at their position. So I do think Brock Bowers has that like Travis Kelce level ceiling, the Mark Andrews ceiling we saw for a year or two. Rob Gronkowski. I do think he could have that type of fantasy impact. And so even though the situation's not great, things could turn around, and I'm still going to have him here in the mid-first round. Then we're going to go with Rome Odunze at the 107. Might be a little bit lower on Odunze than consensus. Some people may leap him just straight up over Neighbors. For me, I do think Malik Neighbors is just a better prospect, so even though he has a worse landing spot, I'm still going to keep him ahead. And for Odunze here, in the short term, this landing spot may not be great because there just is a lot of target competition. You're competing with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen at the wide receiver position. But I mean, this could end up being a really strong pairing between Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze for a very, very long time. And for me, from Chicago, I'm a Bears fan. I'm absolutely hyped with the way this draft panned out. Getting Caleb Williams and then also adding Rome Odunze, that offense is going to be very fun to watch. So still, really like Rome Odunze here as my 107. And then my final tier 2 player, it's going to be JJ McCarthy. I've also seen some people in some mock drafts taking McCarthy higher than this, and I do get it. Like, the landing spot is great. For a rookie quarterback, it's pretty perfect. You have great weapons with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. Kevin O'Connell is the head coach. He inspires a lot of confidence in his quarterbacks. I do just think the upside is a little bit capped given his lack of rushing upside, but I still think he's a very strong mid-round 1 rookie pick. So JJ McCarthy wraps up my tier 2. Now pivoting into tier 3, we're going to start off with a wide receiver, and it's going to be Xavier Worthy here. This was pretty much the perfect landing spot for Xavier Worthy. Not only did he go to the Chiefs, but the Chiefs actually trade up to get him, which obviously shows that they were very interested in adding him to the team. We know the speed, for Worthy is completely there, set the 40 record, and we know that pairs very well with this Chiefs offense and what the Chiefs want out of their weapons. And just looking at this Chiefs wide receiver room, who knows what happens with the Rashee Rice situation. Maybe he gets a short suspension, but that still just opens up the opportunity for Worthy to step in and make a more immediate impact. Remember, the Chiefs really kind of eased Rashee Rice into the offense. He didn't start to break out until later on in the year, even though he was having success in a limited opportunity. So maybe Worthy gets pushed into that position a little bit sooner. You have Hollywood Brown on a 1-year deal. So I just think Xavier Worthy is very talented, broke out as a freshman. I like the fit here, and I think he has a very strong chance to step into this Chiefs offense, make an impact, and be a top weapon here for Patrick Mahomes moving forward. Now after Worthy, I'm going to stick around at the wide receiver position and go with Brian Thomas Jr. here at the 110. I like the landing spot here to the Jaguars. Thomas is an athletic freak, 6'3", 210, tested super well across the board, and is coming off a massive junior season. I think he's a really strong pick towards the back end of round 1 in rookie drafts. Then looking at my 111, we're finally going to get a running back on the board. It is going to be Jonathan Brooks. He was my running back 1 heading into the draft. I flipped him over Trey Benson in my last set of running back rankings, and he gets great draft capital. He's the first running back off the board, the 14th pick of the second round. He goes to the Panthers, and I think some people were looking at that landing spot and maybe thinking it wasn't great. Obviously, the Panthers' offense was pretty rough last year. They didn't have a great rushing attack, but I think this is definitely an interesting spot. They've made an effort to improve the offensive line in free agency. We also look at their new head coach, Dave Canales. He was with the Bucs last year, used Rachaad White like a complete workhorse, so not necessarily saying the same thing is going to happen with Jonathan Brooks here in year 1, especially coming off the ACL, but Canales has shown he's willing to force feed a running back. I think Brooks is going to have a solid workload, and you're kind of just hoping that the rest of this Panthers offense takes a step up and, just improves here in 2024. But I like that the draft capital came through here, and I would feel fine taking them in the back end of the first round. And then to wrap up my top 12, and actually to wrap up tier 3 also, going to be going with Bo Nix here. And say what you want about him as a prospect. I know it's kind of polarizing. Some people thought this was a terrible pick. It was a reach, whatever. But Sean Payton and the Broncos are clearly believers in Bo Nix, and I'd assume that he'd be lined up here to be the day 1 starter. And I don't think we can deny what Sean Payton did to turn Russ around from 2022 to 2023. In 2022, Russ had 16 touchdowns to 11 picks. 2023, 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. Even if Bo Nix isn't going to be some high upside, top 5 NFL quarterback, I don't think that's in the realm of possibilities here. I still think he can be a solid starter. He has enough mobility where he can give you some production on the ground. I wouldn't be shocked if he turns into, I don't want to say a long-term starter, but he could end up being a long-term starter. He doesn't have to be a top 10 guy to provide fantasy value, especially in Superflex leagues. I think he could end up being a nice QB2 for you. So I do think he's a fair option to pick here at the 1-2 turn. Now pivoting into tier 4, we're getting into like the round 2 territory. We're going to start off here with Ladd McConkey as my 201. Love the landing spot to the Chargers here. This is a wide open wide receiver room. He's paired with Justin Herbert, a great route runner. I think he's definitely fair game to take here at the 1-2 turn. Then we're actually going to go back to the running back position, and I'm going to have Trey Benson here as my 202. He goes in the 3rd round with the 2nd pick of that round to the Cardinals. Now, in year 1, he's probably going to be in a committee with James Conner. Conner's on the last deal of his contract, and James Conner is actually coming off a very impressive 2023 season. It wasn't just volume-based. Like, he played very, very well, but he's getting up there in age. It seems like they're, trying to flip the age of that room moving forward with Trey Benson, and I think the Cardinals are just building a pretty, solid young offensive foundation. Kyler at quarterback, Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th overall pick. I like Trey Benson here. I think he's fair game in the early 2nd round. And then after Trey Benson, probably going to be like the most controversial player just across the board in rookie drafts, it's Michael Penix. And I just think it's almost impossible to rank him because you look at the draft capital. Pick 8, that's amazing. If you told me Michael Penix was going top 10, I would have said he was locked into the 1st round of rookie drafts. But he's going to a team that just signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year deal. That part is, pretty terrible. And barring a really serious injury to Kirk Cousins, which, is possible. He's coming off an Achilles. But barring a serious injury where he just, can't play for a full season or is out for the year, Kirk Cousins probably going to be the quarterback 1 for, at the very least 2 years, probably 3, just looking at his contract and, the money he's guaranteed. And the problem I have with this pick is that Michael Penix is not a J.J. McCarthy. He's not a Jordan Love like the Falcons kind of talked about, discussing this pick. He's not a super young developmental quarterback. He's close to being 26 years old. He played 6 college seasons. So the way that I'm looking at this is if you're the Falcons and you're drafting Michael Penix, you're looking at him. If he's sitting there about to be 24 years old and you think he is a developmental quarterback, if he hasn't developed in 6 years, it doesn't seem great. And then if you're looking at him and you're saying, this is a win-now player, he could start for us today, then why would you sign Kirk Cousins? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So you're in this tough spot here where, Penix is going to probably be sitting multiple years. And at least for a guy like Bo Nix, right, people may not love the pick. Maybe they don't think he's worth a 1st-round selection. But we're probably going to find out pretty quickly. For Michael Penix, you could be holding him on your roster for 2-3 years and then find out he's not an NFL quality starter, and then you're just, you really got nothing out of it. You didn't even get to see him on the field, at least within a few years. So I have him here as an early 2nd rounder. If you were I'm not touching him in rookie drafts, I totally get it. But I really just can't spend a 1st-round rookie pick on him, even though he went top 10 in the draft. It's just not a good situation to have here with Penix. I kind of feel bad for, honestly, him and Kirk. Kirk Cousins, he's talked about how he, found this new home with the Falcons. Now they're, already drafting his replacement. And then for Michael Penix, he's coming off a huge year. There were a lot of teams out there who probably would have drafted him to be their starter here in 2024. And now he's, potentially a backup for the next 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons. So those are my thoughts on Michael Penix. I feel like it might, develop. Who knows? It was still just a shocking pick to see that go down. But sticking around in tier 4, we're going to wrap it up with 2 wide receivers. The first one's going to be Keon Coleman, and this draft went very, very well for Keon Coleman. It seemed like he was probably going to go somewhere on day 2, but to be the first pick of the 2nd round was good to see, and the landing spot to the Bills was also pretty great. There are obviously some reasonable concerns, there about Keon Coleman, but there's also some bright spots. He's still only 20 years old. He's very, very young. We look back at his sophomore season at Michigan State. He outproduced Jaden Reed as a 19-year-old. The landing spot here with the Bills is obviously fantastic. He'll have the opportunity to be their wide receiver 1. So I definitely did move Keon Coleman up from my pre-draft rankings. And then the final guy in this tier is going to be A.D. Mitchell, my 205. He kind of had an unexpected slip in the draft going into the 2nd round. A few days before the draft, he was minus 700 to, go in round 1, so it seemed pretty much like it was a lock. Obviously, it didn't go that way. He lands with the Colts. I wouldn't say it's a great landing spot. It is a pretty crowded wide receiver room with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. Plus, you have Anthony Richardson, who looked good, but he's not a pure pocket passer who's going to be throwing for 300 yards a game, right? He's going to be using his legs. He's going to be mobile. I don't know what the passing volume is going to look like, but he's still a very talented prospect, solid round 2 draft capital, so he's going to wrap up tier 4 for me. Now, pivoting into my final tier, tier 5, We're going to be starting off with 2 first-round wide receivers. The first one is going to be Ricky Pearsall here, my 206, the 31st pick in the draft to the 49ers. I'm probably going to be lower on him than consensus. I think people are going to see the landing spot. They're going to see his big season in 2023. They're going to see the first-round draft capital, and they're going to really like him. Personally, I'm just not a huge fan of these players who don't dominate until their 5th year. It's typically a red flag, right? If you're not able to put together a massive season before you're way older than everyone, it's not a great sign. It'll be interesting to see what happens here with the 49ers wide receiver room. You would hope that one of those guys gets traded. It would definitely give him an inside shot to be the wide receiver 2, but we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. And then the other first-round wide receiver I mentioned, Xavier Legette, he goes right after Pearsall, 32nd to the Panthers. This is another guy with a 5th-year breakout. His was even more extreme, where he did pretty much nothing through 4 years and then just had a monster 5th year. It feels a little bit like the Mingo pick we saw the Panthers make last year. A little bit different, though, because Mingo never had like a dominant season, whereas Legette did in year 5. But you're talking about pretty athletic guys with later breakouts. You're kind of just hoping here that Young and the Panthers turn it around, like I talked about with Jonathan Brooks. But they are bringing in some young weapons. Hopefully some of these guys just hit and give Bryce Young some help. And then after Legette, we're going to be going with back-to-back running backs. We're going to go first with Marshawn Lloyd. He goes round 3 to the Packers. And originally, this may not seem like a great landing spot. You hear the Packers, Josh Jacobs just signed a 4-year deal. But that Jacobs contract could very easily just end up being a 1-year deal, the way it's kind of structured. So if Jacobs is there for 1 year, I think Marshawn Lloyd operating as the running back 2 the first season. I know you have A.J. Dillon still there. Who knows how that shakes out. But this is a very, very young offense. We know that wide receiver room is very young. Jordan Love heading into his 2nd year as the starter. I think this is a pretty fun long-term landing spot. Like I said, probably won't be great for 2024. Like if you're just in like a redraft league, probably not great. But long-term, I think he could be interesting. And then another running back here, Jalen Wright. Would have preferred him to go somewhere in day 2. He falls to day 3 in the 4th round, but I really liked him heading into the draft, and this landing spot to the Dolphins is really, really fun. Obviously, you have Raheem Mostert back for the 2024 season, but I think long-term we're going to be looking at an Achane Wright committee, and that just sounds explosive. That sounds fun. We saw last year, you don't need a huge workload in this offense to deliver strong fantasy production. Both Achane and Mostert were running back 1s, despite being in a committee. So I think this is a pretty fun landing spot. And if he were to go day 3, like this really is the best situation in my opinion. It might not happen in 2024 with Mostert there, but I think long-term, this is pretty fun for Jalen Wright. Then we're actually going to have our second tight end. It's going to be Ben Sinnott. He goes with the 21st pick in the 2nd round. He's a big dude, 6'4", 250, had really impressive athletic testing, and then he had 2 solid seasons with receiving production. 49 receptions for almost 700 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns in 2023. Very, very interesting pick here. This is kind of the same range where Sam Laporta was going last year, like back end of the 2nd round, especially in sharper leagues going round 2. Not saying he's going to have some sort of crazy Sam Laporta season, but he checks a lot of the boxes here. Good athlete. He has the draft capital, also produced as a pass catcher in college, so someone I'll probably have a lot of shares of, especially because he wasn't a huge name heading into the draft, but definitely came through with that draft capital to the Commanders. And then my second to last player here, my 211, it's going to be Jalen Polk. He goes with the 5th pick of the 2nd round. In 2023, he went for over 1,100 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. That was in a very, very crowded Washington wide receiver room with Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan. He steps into a wide-open Patriots wide receiver room. He's going to be paired with rookie quarterback Drake May. Wasn't like a massive fan of him as a prospect, wasn't, out on him or anything. He definitely went a little bit earlier than I expected, and he definitely will have an opportunity to produce in year 1 here with the Patriots. And then my final player here, I wanted to sneak in Troy Franklin, but I ended up going with Blake Corum. My final player here, 212. He gets round 3 draft capital to the Rams. I'm going to be sharing a backfield with Kyron Williams. Kind of an interesting pick for the Rams because you have 2 pretty small running backs here. Blake Corum, I think, a little bit heavier than Kyron Williams, but I believe he's only like 5'7". I think when you look at Corum's path to success, it's probably going to be splitting work on the ground and then trying to work his way into a goal line role. Even though he's not a huge running back, we obviously saw him score a ton of touchdowns for Michigan. Kyron Williams, a smaller running back. Maybe they don't want him in there on the goal line. I think that's where Blake Corum could kind of find some success. We'll see how much he breaks into it in his first year, but an interesting landing spot going to the Rams, a little bit unexpected. But that's going to wrap it up for my top 24. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Which players you think are too high or too low? Did I snub anyone from the top 24? Like I mentioned, I'll be updating my running backs and wide receivers probably tomorrow, and then I'll have like a top 36 after that. So if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next one.